I've always liked the quiet that falls between midnight and 4 a.m., the hollow hours when the highway is more suggestion than place. Out there, the world narrows into two pale lines and a humming strip of blacktop, and in that narrowness, your mind behaves. It has to. You keep your rig between the lines. You keep your speed honest, and you let the white noise of tires and wind smooth out all the edges you collect when you live the rest of your life in rooms. That's how it's supposed to go. That's how it went for me for 15 years, give or take breakage. Then October came, and with it, the fog, and I signed a bill of lading in Portland for a load of aluminum tubing, bound for a yard outside Boise. They strapped the bundle so clean I could have eaten off the slings. I checked it twice anyway. Habit, superstition, call it what you want. I ticked my boxes: chains, fire extinguisher, triangles, spare fuses, good tread, clean mirrors. I packed a fresh thermos and a stale sandwich, and I rolled east with the city lights fading in the mirrors, like a soft promise that I could turn back anytime I wanted. Out beyond Gresham, the fog arrived in low swales first, pooling like water in the dips where the land folded. It lifted into sheets after that, and then into a curtain. By the time I hit the high timber, it wasn't fog so much as an eraser. Even the trees, which usually stand like jurors on either side of the road up there, had their faces washed away. I logged mile 212 at 1:15 a.m. I like neat numbers. They make me feel like the night, and I have an understanding. At 1:19, there it was, 213. I glanced at the clock as the reflector eyes on the sign, threw back my lights, and kept going. Radio on low, heater working, windows cracked because I like to smell the forest, even when I can't see it. I passed mile 213 again at 1:24. It had the same tilt in the post, the same little crease in the metal where something heavy had once kissed it. I slowed a bit, not because I was spooked, but because you ease off the throttle when anything feels not quite. I told myself I'd misread the first one. It happens. White paint, green signs, same rhythm. Your head thinks it recognizes a chorus and starts humming along. At 1:30, I pushed past another 213. The GPS cursor lost interest in pretending and simply hovered. A blue arrow divorced from reality. Cell signal bars looked like teeth knocked out in a fight. I thumbed the CB for company out of old habit. Portland Yard, eastbound 26, I said. Visibility limited. Mile marker looks stuck on 213. You got any signage work out here? Static, then a long, soft exhale that didn't belong to radios or wind. I waded through it. Sometimes you hear weather as if it's thinking. It's fine if you don't think back. Mile 213, I tried again, and I heard myself say it back. Same rasp, same rhythm, except my version came a half-second late, like my voice had been recorded by a place with the slow blood. I let the mic back into its cradle and told myself it was the CB's weirdness. Around then, the rest area lights bled through the fog off to the right, bright as a fever. I knew that rest area. ID. Stopped there for coffee once and wouldn't eat tea again. Water tasted like old pennies. But I pulled in because another truth learned out here is that a break sometimes breaks the spell. The lot was almost empty. One sedan sat askew near the end, engine idling, its exhaust curled in a faint rope. I parked 3 lanes over and killed my lights. My own engine idled fine, beautifully even. I thought, that's something I can trust. I took the flashlight, zipped my jacket up to the throat, and walked slow because the fog, when it's thick like that, begs you to test how much of you it can swallow at once. The sedan's windows were opaque with condensation. I rapped on the driver's side glass with my knuckles. "You okay in there?" The sound didn't carry. It came back in my ears like I tapped the inside of my skull. I cupped my hands, wiped a circle. The driver's seat was empty. Keys stood like a little silver flag in the ignition. Coffee in the holder, lid off, steam a ghost finger. I opened the door. The dome light showed crumbs, a receipt, a child sticker stuck to the glove box, glitter worn down to metal flakes. The seat was slightly warm. "Bathroom," I said, but the fog caught the word and held it there, greedy. I stood by the sedan a minute longer than made sense. I have an instinct for nights that want to become stories you tell yourself later. This one had that taste. I shut the door and went back to my truck. Back on the ramp, I nudged the rig onto the highway again, careful, like easing into a cold lake. I reset the trip meter so I could prove something small to myself. 3 minutes at my speed should put me past 214. I gave it 6. The mile marker that materialized at the edge of my beams was 213 again, its paint almost glossy with moisture. I saw the same flake missing from the curve of the 3, then a fresh smear high on the post that hadn't been there before, like a hand dirty with something darker than road had tried to steady itself. "You missed it," my CB said, and I knew it was me under the hiss, me with my breath pushed through iron mesh. I braked harder than was pretty. 2 coffee stirrers shot out of a tray, cubby and rattled on the mat like bones. I put on 4 ways, eased to the shoulder, and sat there until my pulse changed. I told myself things I could hold. Tack steady, oil good, water good, electrical good. I opened my door and the fog pushed in like a curious animal. Not mean yet, just close. Gravel felt damp and slick. I crouched and touched it, and my fingers came up, pearl wet. I walked forward because that's what you do when your head is making tunnels. The mile marker, S green face, showed me to myself in a warped reflection. A long man with a jacket, zipped 2 high eyes that belonged to someone who'd seen the inside of engine compartments at 3 in the morning. I pressed my palm to the metal. It was warmer than it had a right to be. A hum ran through it, like road vibrations stolen by a thing that shouldn't be vibrating. Headlights grew in the fog behind me with that bull rush intensity that says, "Big vehicle, big speed, no patience." I stepped aside and raised the flashlight against instinct. You don't blind another driver in the night unless you want your ghost to be polite at your funeral. And the truck that blew past me was my truck. Same company number, same dent in the bumper from the time I kissed a low cement post at a way station. My own air freshener, an old cedar leaf, more superstition than scent, hung at the dashboard, swinging. I could swear I saw me hunched over the wheel. I ran back to my cab, heart running too, and climbed in with hands that remembered their work. The odometer said 666.0 miles. The needle had been dwarfed by 421 when I left Portland. I stared until numbers felt like a language I had to learn under duress. "You're still behind yourself," the CB whispered. A parent scolding a child for dawdling at a crosswalk. I turned it off. The hiss continued for a beat after the switch, like breath finishing itself. I drove. Not smarter, just faster. Because nothing is more human than thinking speed can outrun a shape that doesn't belong to speed. Nights where you can't see far make you learn how to live in the near. But I was done with the near. The white paint on the fog line stuttered by. The center reflectors blinked like a patient heartbeat. I saw the mile marker again with that new smear, then again with the smear gone. and a crease added to the post lower down, like a boot had protested. Every 213 was its own idea of what 213 ought to be. I passed the rest area again. The sedan idled still, exhaust thinner now, steam quiet. I wanted to stop again, and I wanted to scrape my palms raw on the steering wheel so I wouldn't After a while, I couldn't tell you how long exactly because my clock had stopped telling the truth. I saw a glow off to the left, and then a sign with hand-painted letters. Lonnie, S open, 24 hours. The kind of place that exists everywhere the road needs to remember it. It's not the only thing. I pulled in because it was there, and a man can keep a hand on a wheel and a foot on a pedal forever, without turning into the wheel and the pedal. Inside, it smelled like bacon fat and burned sugar. A woman with a name tag that said, Marla looked up and lost a second of her expression, like people do when deja vu puts a soft hand on them. You came in last night, she said. No, I said. I've been driving. She nodded as if I'd told her I was thinking of buying a boat, which is to say, like it had nothing to do with her but might hurt someone. You had coffee, sat at the corner booth, said you were waiting for the fog to lift. She pointed with her chin at a booth where a coffee ring had printed itself into the laminate like a target. On the salt shaker next to it, someone had scratched a small notch. I put my thumb on that exact notch and felt my nail find the groove as if it had been carved for me, because it had. What time is it? I asked. She looked up at the wall clock like it was a secret she didn't care to share, but would anyway. 1:47. What date? She smiled then, not unkind, but like someone who knows what question comes next and doesn't need to want to be there for it. Hon, if you're tired, we got a cot in back. My phone said fully charged. I hadn't plugged it in. The GPS gave me a blue arrow and the words GWY 26, mile 213, as if that were a street address where I could receive mail. I paid for coffee because not paying for coffee is a thing I don't only do, no matter how weird the day goes. The bill felt like paper someone had just printed and heat-sealed in time. Outside, my truck idled. That sound, the rhythm of it, has always calmed me. It did now. I climbed in and laid both hands on the wheel, the way you do when the room is spinning, and you convince yourself boats are safe because water knows what to do with a body. The road took me because that's what roads do when you ask them. The fog changed. An animal rolling over in sleep, I settled into the slow press of motion, and for a while the world made sense again simply because it was moving past. Then a shape materialized at the shoulder, low to the ground, head high and watchful. A deer. The fog slicked its hide to mercury. It took a single step toward my lane and stopped. Head cocked like it had heard a joke, I broke eye contact, because there are things that feel like they can climb into you through eyes if you let them. I passed the mile marker with the smear. A minute later, I passed a mile marker with no smear, a different crease in the metal, a different angle to the post. A minute after that, I passed one with a long black scuff at boot height. I passed a sign where the number 3 had been swapped out for a 2, and then painted over into a lumpy 3 again, paint layered like years. I passed a sign that wore a fresh shine, and a pinprick hole dead center, as if some bored kid with a 22 had chosen it as a god to test. My hands cramped on the wheel in a way I hadn't felt since my first winter run through Wyoming, when the wind reminded me I was a passenger more than a driver. I flexed my fingers, shook them out, and the CB crackled. Don't stop, it said, and this time the voice wasn't mine. Like an echo, It was mine the way a brother would be if you had grown up in the same throat. I squeezed the mic, thumb finding the groove 1,000 nights had carved. "Where are you?" I asked, even though I knew. "Up ahead," I told myself back, "and behind, and to the right where the shoulder crumbles. Don't stop." I didn't. Not then. I drove into a morning that didn't come. The fog paled like it was thinking about surrender. Shapes gathered and then broke. Once, far off in the left side of my view, I saw a highway patrol crown Vic angled across lanes. Light bar a weak heartbeat under milk. A man stood with a clipboard. His hat looked like every state trooper hat I'd ever seen. I lifted a hand. He lifted one back without looking at me, as if we were two neighbors in yards divided by a taller fence than either of us could see over. Then he was gone, taken back by the softness, when I finally stopped, because every living thing stops, and that is the truth fogs depend on. I did it because a dark mass loomed ahead on the right, chewing up the shoulder. Hazard lights winked weakly. I killed the speed until my rig felt the weight shift on its springs and argued. I rolled it past a wrecked semi with its nose kissing the guardrail, and its cab caved on the driver's side. It might have been any truck if you were the kind of person who didn't notice small dents and tape ghosts where old decals had been. But I am not that kind of person. My stomach folded into a new shape. That was my cab. The windshield had webbed in a pattern I recognized, not from mine, but from every accident photo Ivy ever tried not to look at too long. There was red on the inside. The door hung half open. The number on the side matched mine. The air freshener, a cedar leaf ID, picked up in a lot in Coos Bay at the end of a long week, hung by a frayed thread. I parked ahead of it and set my brake by habit inside a mind where habit had become the only religion. I walked back against the guardrail with the fog pressing at my back like it wanted to see too. The cab's interior was a room I had lived in for 15 years, and there it was in ruin. A man slumped against the wheel. He had my jacket and a scar on his thumb. He'd given himself fixing a stubborn ratchet strap 3 summers back. His face was turned enough that if you wanted to be kind, you could pretend you couldn't tell. I could tell. The odometer, icy and elegant, read 666.0. I said nothing for a long time. Sometimes silence has more people living in it than sound. When the horn came, a blast behind me that was more panic than anger. I turned. Headlights bore down, framed by fog like a portrait of inevitability. Another truck was coming in too hot. My truck. The same number, the same leaf on the dash. I saw the driver's hands gripping the wheel. He was shouting. I recognized the shape of his mouth. The part of me that believes in simple rules spoke. Move. The part of me that had been pushed out of time by a place that wanted me gave just a beat. The truck brushed me. It didn't hit me like a catastrophic rewrite. It touched me like someone waking you in a motel when you've overslept and they need the room. I fell into the narrow space between its hot skin and the guardrail, and I felt air take something from me and put something else back. The truck hammered into the wreck with a sound that had iron and a long grief in it. The horn stuck, a wail, then died. The fog boiled and settled. My ears stored the noise away in a place where it would insist on returning at wrong times forever. I got up. My shoulder burned where the truck had asked permission. I licked my lips and my tongue found grit. There were 3 rigs now, all mine, all humming their last notes. One had been there long enough that the hazard lights pulsed sporadically, like a heart learning to forget its job. The newest steamed. If you'd been a trooper driving past in drier weather, you'd have called it a chain reaction you see when a truck stops wrong at a bad time and the road conspires. I leaned into the newest cab. The man inside was making a sound low in his chest. His eyes were open, and they were mine. He looked at me like I was help, and like I was a lie. "Don't stop," he said. "I didn't," I said. "Until I did." He blinked like he'd heard a clever thing at the wrong party. "CB," he said, "tell him. Tell me. I don't... He made a shape with his hands like he was holding a wheel in air. He didn't have more words. I understood. There are times language feels like a tool meant for a different species. I climbed back out and stood on the shoulder and listened. The fog didn't breathe. It waited. That's a distinction. Breathing is a thing a living system does. Waiting is what a trap does when it knows hunger is not an emergency, but an economy. I walked the shoulder until the next mile marker loomed. 213 again, but the post was new. A clean cut, no boot scuff, no smear. I touched it and felt the hum again, fainter. I talked to the air, like a man talk prays when the old prayers are for rooms with softer furniture. "I understand," I said. "You're a place that remembers things wrong, on purpose." A pair of headlights came slow, the first car that didn't belong to me. It was a compact, brave, in the way small things are brave when they don't know the scale of the world. It drifted a bit in my lane, corrected, drifted again. I waved my flashlight in long lateral strokes. The car eased to the shoulder and stopped 20 feet back. A young guy got out in a hoodie, too thin for the night. He held his phone in one hand like a talisman. "Yo," he said, because people like him always start with that sound. "You okay?" "There's like a pileup." "Turn around," I said. "What?" "Turn around," I said again, slower, because urgency makes people think you're selling them something. "Go back the way you came. Don't stop until you see a sign that isn't 213. He squinted like he might be the sort of kid who'd challenge a rule because the rule made him feel small. Then he saw the wrecks properly. His mouth opened. I watched the part of him that had wanted a story make way for the part that wanted to keep being a person in a car. He backed up, got in, and I saw his reverse lights shine, diffused through the fog, like a blessing that is careful not to look like one. The car made a slow U, and taillights crawled away and were swallowed. I went back to my truck. Not any of the wrecked ones. Mine. The unruined one that still had coffee in the thermos that tasted like metal hope, and a seat with exactly the ass groove you get when you've elogged a small fraction of a life with one machine. I sat with my hands on the wheel and felt the vibration of the engine find me like a friend finding you in a crowd by putting a hand between your shoulder blades. I keyed the mic. "Eastbound 26, I said. "Fog advisory. Mile marker 213 behaving rude. If you hear this in time, don't stop." Static hummed. Then my voice returned, warmed by the wire. "If you hear this in time," I told myself, "don't stop." Somewhere else, from a place overlapping this one by a few seconds, another me said, "You passed it again." And I hated him, and loved him because he was annoying, and because he was me, and because we were both trying. I drove again because the only thing I have ever known to do, in the presence of something that wants me, is to refuse to be where it expects me to be. I counted. Counting is useless when the world has decided to lie, but men have kept worse faith with worse things. I counted white dashes, 8, 8, 8, breathed on the 7th, blinked on the 8th. I counted seconds. I counted the number of times the heater clicked like a heartbeat in an old animal. I counted a version of the Lord as prayer that backfired and turned into a list of every rest area between here and La Grande. On one pass, a set of cones appeared in the right lane, then a yellow arrow board pointing us left, as if a road crew had bloomed in the fog like a coral and wanted to shepherd traffic through a missing piece of night. I followed the arrow because arrows are irresponsible invitations if you are the kind of person who grew up good. The lane squeezed down. Orange vests moved as if underwater. A man with a slow sign turned it, and it read, "Stop," and then slow, and then stop, like he couldn't make up his mind. How merciful to be. I rolled forward until my window framed his face. He leaned to speak. His skin looked like it had been printed in too few colors. His eyes were coins thrown into a wishing well a long time ago by a boy who didn't get what he asked for. "Shift's over," he said, like that explained anything. "You're late for the part where you learn. What am I supposed to learn?" He rotated the sign again, slow in a way that felt less like caution and more like ceremony. "Don't stop," he said. He might have smiled or grimaced. Fog makes the same cloak for both. "Shift's over." He waved me through. I went. In the mirror, the cones had arranged themselves into a shape that, if you tilted your head and squinted, made the number 3. The next 213 had a different bruise in its metal and a smear higher up that looked like when a child drags 4 fingers across paint. The next had bullet freckles and a chip out of the left bolt. I began to crave a version I'd seen before. The way you crave a song you recognize in a room where the playlist 1T stopped being new and clever. Familiarity is mercy. The place had decided on another mercy. The road gave me Lonnie's again. I parked because a man will walk back into a story that didn't to love him, because familiarity makes even unkindness digestible. Inside, Marla turned as if she were practiced in the choreography of my entrance. "We keep a cot," she said, and her voice had acquired a sympathy that felt more like a priest S than a waitress OS. I sat where the coffee ring lived and put my hands flat on the laminate as if to ground out a charge. "Do people talk about it?" I asked. "Talk about what?" "The mile." She busied herself with a pot that didn't need attention. "Folks talk about fog like it's a person. They give it credit or blame like they give a neighbor who puts up lights too early. They say there has a stretch out there that keeps the clock and the road for itself a while. Then it gives both back when it's done, but not always to the same people it borrowed them from. And you," she looked at the wall clock and at my face, and found neither instructive. "I pour coffee," she said. "People pour their ghosts on top of it, see if they dissolve." Do I? Have I? I couldn't find a verb that would be true and also kind to us. "You pay," she said. "You leave. You come back. Some folks we don't see again. That's the road too." I left enough cash to pay for a lot of coffee and a forgiveness she couldn't grant. Outside, I found my truck, since it found me better than any church ever had. As I climbed in, I realized my fingers were leaving prints on the chrome, like the metal wanted to keep a record. I smeared them out with my sleeve because sometimes you throw pebbles at rivers, even when you know they don't notice. The road welcomed me back with the same polite lie a magician offers when he asks to borrow your watch. I drove until 213 felt like a metronome inside my teeth. Somewhere in that repetition, fear softened into a companionable dread. It's a dangerous comfort, the way a bad habit fits a body perfectly if you let it. I thought about the kid with the hoodie and hoped taillights could sometimes wound whatever hunts on roads, the way bright colors warn animals off poisonous frogs. I thought about the man in orange and wondered what shift meant when time wouldn't agree to be a line. The next interruption came with a sound, faint and particular, a tire on gravel. I checked mirrors. A patrol car trailed me at a cautious distance, light bar dark. After 100 yards it chirped, a polite cough. I eased the shoulder and put my four-ways on because laws you learned when you were green should be honored when you are gray. The trooper walked up slow. His hat brim cut the fog into a different geometry. He tapped the side of my trailer, a habit all troopers share like a superstition, as if greeting a horse that could kick. "Evening," he said. His voice had the careful neutrality of someone who has decided to be kind until given a reason to escalate. "You know why I pulled you over, sir?" I said. "I've been passing the same mile marker for more time than I can count, and I would pay you cash money for any reason you can give me for anything." He studied my face. You can see men measure other men in jobs where measurement is sometimes the only tool they have to keep themselves from drowning. "Ben reports," he said. "Fog wall out here. Folks get turned around. Best to sit tight at a turnout until it burns off." "If I stop," I said, and my voice did something I don't let it do usually. "I think I'll stay stopped." He looked over my shoulder toward the wrecks up road, as if he could see them through cloud and distance. Maybe he could. "We got 3 pileups on this stretch in the last month," he said. "Same mile. Dispatch gets calls from folks who don't leave names. Says the fog moves wrong. I don't write tickets for weather." He tipped his hat like a man in an old movie. "I do tell people to be careful anyway. You want an escort to the next turnout? Would it help?" He touched the brim again. "Sometimes the only way out is through," he said. "Sometimes through just means you're deeper in something." "Do you stop?" I asked. He considered, then gave me something true enough to feel like a favor. "I keep moving," he said. "I go home. My wife says my coat smells like cold soup and wet lit matches when the fog comes. I tell her that's just October. I don't correct her if she thinks I mean the month." He walked back to his car. He didn't turn his lights on. He pulled ahead, slow, and I followed him into a version of the fog that felt thin as gauze instead of thick as skin. We rolled like that for a while. I watched his taillights. He watched the road like he'd married it, and their fights were private. Then his lights fluttered once, as if a wind we couldn't feel had plucked at them, and when I blinked, he was gone, not turned, not accelerated, just not there. The lane in front of me held the place where his presence had been, and then it held only fog again. The 213 that followed had a new gouge. The ground at its base looked churned like something had planted and replanted its feet there too often. I drove on and began to speak aloud, not to the fog exactly, and not to myself, to whatever it was in me that had authority. "Keep the lane," I said. "Breathe on 8. Mirrors. Don't stop. If you stop, you stay. If you stay, you stack." It worked until it didn't. It didn't when a figure appeared at the center line, arm raised. Not a trooper, not a kid. Me. I knew the jacket hang, the knee that turned in, because of an old misstep on a warehouse dock in Yakima, when I'd been too proud to admit a box was too heavy. He waved me down, and I watched his arm move at the tempo of mine when it ace-tired. I eased. God help me, I eased. Because how do you drive through your own hand when it asks you to be decent? He came to the window. His face was mine, reassembled in a house with fewer right angles. "You need to stop," he said. "If you stop, it changes." "I don't think it changes for the better," I said. "It changes," he said, like a man talking about a tool he doesn't like, but that gets the job done. "I think it needs one of us to stop so the others can go. I don't know which one." I stopped. It didn't help me. "Maybe it helps you." "I don't think the place bargains," I said. He looked toward the shoulder as if someone we both respected had called his name. "Maybe it doesn't," he said. "Maybe we bargain with ourselves, and the place likes the sound." He put his palm flat on my door, like a brother might when he doesn't hug. "Don't stop," he said, and he stepped back into nothing. I went, and then the world, this one, finally decided to pretend it had mornings. The fog lightened from iron to pewter, to a silver so thin you could see shapes in it. The trees came back as a rumor of growth. The road looked less like a wound and more like a path. The next mile marker was 214. I laughed. It came out like a cough. I punched the wheels softly, like you clap when the band gets the chorus right at last. I checked the GPS. The blue arrow had a map under it again. My phone bars stood up like good soldiers. I didn't cry. I felt the ghost of what crying would be. Do a lap around my ribcage and move on. I drove for 10 minutes, then 20. 215 arrived and acted like a sign is supposed to act, indifferent and true. The rest area didn't appear. The patrol car didn't materialize and then forget itself. The radio hissed and then stopped, ordinary as heat. I kept going until the fog broke fully, and the mountains stepped into their bodies again, green and tall and unconcerned. A crow flew low across my hood, and I braked a hair because I am superstitious about crows in October. They have a look like they know the inventory of a place better than us. At 3:06 a.m., I pulled into a wide turnout and set the brake. The silence looked new, not manufactured by a thing that had swallowed it first. I poured the last of the coffee and drank it without feeling like the cup had side eyes. The aluminum load rode easy. I walked the straps and smacked them with my palm until sound came back like a proper report. I climbed into the cab and put my head back and closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I remembered the idea of sleep so strongly. It worked like a placebo. When I turned the key, the engine caught like it always does. The odometer read 666.0. My breath stopped just long enough for the edges of the world to sharpen. Then the numbers clicked to 666.1 and 666.2, as if they'd been stuck for a practical reason and had finally solved it. I laughed again, softer, and the sound didn't hurt. I made Boise by late morning, and a forklift kid in a beanie unloaded me fast, like he wanted to earn the right to complain about how fast TAD had to work. The yard foreman signed and squinted. "You look like you saw church," he said. "I saw fog," I said. "Same difference some days," he said, and rubbed at a stain on his form that had decided to be permanent. On the deadhead back, I took a different route because I could, and because I thought it would be wise to deny a thing the satisfaction of having me again. I slept 8 hours in a motel with floral bedspreads and a carpet that smelled like men who carried their own pillows. I ate eggs in a diner where the waitress called me hon without meaning it, and therefore meaning it more. I drove in daylight. Sun burned away the memory of how you can live inside a piece of weather when the piece wants you. I did not go back to Highway 26 that month. When I did, because you always return to the roads that taught you a new note, whether you liked the lesson or not. It was late November and the fog that year had gotten lazy. I passed mile 212 at noon with the sun a thin coin. I passed 213 once, only once, The GPS performed like a confident liar who knows where to place emphasis. I saw Lonnie's sign and didn't stop. I waved at Marla through the windshield, like you wave at people you've never asked about their lives, but would be sad to learn are gone. Once around midnight in December, when the fog returned, as if it had left something under the couch and needed it back, I keyed the CB because I am a man who keeps a box of rituals in his mind and takes one out when the weather warrants. If you can hear me on eastbound 26, I said, don't stop. The hiss answered with my voice a fraction late. The difference was that this time I knew where I was when it answered me. Not behind myself, not ahead, not to the right where the shoulder crumbles. I was exactly where I was. Sometimes that's enough, though not always. I don't take passengers. On fog nights, I don't take calls. I keep the radio low, and I count white dashes 8 at a time, and I breathe on the 7th and blink on the 8th. I occasionally feel like I am selling myself on a religion made of paint and rhythm. It works as well as any faith that doesn't demand blood. Every once in a while I see a sedan idling at a rest area, exhaust thin, coffee steaming. I keep going. I tell myself that there is a man in a different version of me, knocking on the window of that car and discovering it is empty, in a world where doors don't always belong to rooms. I wish him courage. I don't need to stop to give him any because I've relearned the kind you can hand a man through glass doesn't fix the kind weather steals. People at the yard ask me sometimes about the number 213 because they hear truckers talk and they like to collect spooky facts the way fishermen collect knots. I say the mile markers out there are fine, which is true on more days than not. I say fog can make a road into a house with too many doors and no good exits unless you keep walking, which is true in more places than highways. I say don't stop, even if stopping feels like the polite thing when a man who looks like you raises his hand. When I can't sleep, which is rarer now, I imagine the road as a long animal that likes to play with its food. I imagine I learned its game well enough to be let go with teeth marks, but no infection. I imagine, because I've earned a little arrogance, that when the CB hisses somewhere on a fog night and a voice tells a driver, you passed it again, maybe sometimes that voice is mine offered across a distance that isn't measured in miles. A warning, a nudge, a breadcrumb in a weather that eats crumbs. I haven't seen the wrecks again, not mine, not anyone's that belongs to me. But I know they're there, not because I'm haunted by them, though I am, but because places that can do what that mile can do don't do retired tricks when they break a crowd. They put the props away and bring them back when the room is right. And if I ever find myself easing onto the shoulder without meaning to, if I ever feel the seat under me change from a chair into an idea that holds weight wrong, if I ever hear my voice come back a half second late with news I don't want, I know what I'll do. I'll put my hands at 10 and 2. I'll breathe on 7. I'll blink on 8. I'll say out loud, not to the fog and not to myself, but to that authority in me that cuts deals with night. Dawn and stop, because in all the miles that belong to men, and all the miles that belong to the things men pretend are just weather, the only truth I carry like a fuse I never have to replace is this. Once you stop in the mile that vanishes, you teach it your name, and then it never forgets your mouth. So I keep moving, and most nights that's enough to keep the loop hungrier than me. And on the nights when it isn't, on the nights when I pass 213 and hear that soft, familiar sentence, you passed it again, I answer the man I used to be, like a brother who finally learned how to talk plain. I know. Keep going.